One of the things that draws a lot of tourism is the 1994 genocide, which is not necessarily the best type of tourism, but while I was there, that's what most people do come to Rwanda for. And it's actually gotten much better since the genocide. Like I said, it's one of the safest countries that you can go to in the region. And it's actually one of the cleanest places that you can go to. Kigali is the cleanest city right now over in Africa. They have a ban on plastic bags. So if you go and walk out through the city, there is no trash on the street. You're not allowed to eat on the street because it's said to be unclean. But the reason why Global Youth Connect is there is because it's a post-genocidal country, and they only operate this program in post-conflict regions. So they have a program in Rwanda, they have a program in Bosnia, and it's primarily an advocacy program, which means that I wasn't specifically there to do research. I was there to advocate for marginalized populations and to have youth be able to learn about the circumstances in post-conflict regions, specifically in Rwanda. So the experience was a lot of tourism, which talked about the 1994 genocide. It was workshops and site visits that focused on the marginalized groups, such as people who had contracted, who had gotten HIV and AIDS from the genocide, people who were working on LGBTQ rights, and then also some other marginalized groups that I'll talk about later. And the goal is to play a positive role and to assist youth to further Rwanda's progress, and also to repair any damage that international actors had made when they were there during the 1994 genocide. And the main reason and way that they do this is they take 14 to 35 international and local actors. So the group that I was with was partially Rwandese, partially international. And so here's a picture of the participants that I was with. There were about 20 of us, half of us Rwandese, half of us mostly American. But the group that I'm really going to talk about is the refugee population that's in Rwanda, which is one of the groups that we were working with. And two of the participants for my delegation were Congolese refugees. And I'll be introducing them to you. But Congolese refugees, just to give you an overview of the situation, because right now the big media push is what's happening for European refugees. And Congolese refugees, especially over in Rwanda, the conflict in DRC has been going for approximately 20 years since they moved over to Rwanda. There are approximately 5 camps right now that, that Congolese refugees are staying in within Rwanda. But one of them is extremely dangerous because it is right on the border, which means that there are attacks happening in that camp all the time. And there is right now about 84,000 refugees in the country, and by the end of the year it's probably going to be around 94,000. And all of these refugees are basically being assisted by UNHCR in their entirety, and they're living off of $9 US every single day per person, which means that a lot of people in these camps have really large families, because the more people you have in your family, the more money you're getting to be able to live off of per month. So this is the first participant that is a Congolese refugee that we had the opportunity of living with. And I have a very personal connection to her. Her name is Eugenie. And she was my homestay sister while I was there. We got to spend a weekend being paired with Rwandese families, and she was one of the participants that was paired with me. So for a weekend, I got to share a bed with her and do some pillow talk. And unfortunately, the type of pillow talk that you get when you're staying with a Congolese refugee is some pretty horrible stuff. So for instance, she is in her 20s. She is one of the very few that has a degree from a university. Her graduation was simply just her. She's one of the only people in her camp that has that degree. And she originally came for the Mugombwa camp, which is the camp that was massacred by DRC. And her family were moved afterwards because, thankfully, her and her family survived the massacre and were one of the only families that didn't lose somebody during the massacre. And this was when she was about 9 or 10 years old. And then she got moved over to another camp called Gihembe. And this is Oscar in the center. Oscar is around 30 years old, and he recently just got accepted to come to get his MBA in the United States next year, which is really exciting. And he comes from the camp called Kiziba, which is located further away from the border, is a little bit more safe, and he's actually the head teacher at his camp. So he's very, very important to all of them. He's very highly prestiged and very, very nice person. So to give you a few statistics, this is Gihembe, where Eugenie lives. And as you can see, they're semi-permanent structures, but there's a lot of them in a very small amount of space. So sanitation and hygiene is a very big issue. The average space per person in most of the camps in Rwanda is 16.33 square meters, and that is instead of the 45 square meters, which is the minimum that you're supposed to have. So 16 to 45, very big difference, which means that a lot of people are getting sick. There's a lot of issues in all of these camps. And let's say that there's about 53,000 through UNHCR, which are protected by UNHCR. And UNHCR takes care of all of the issues such as how much food is being distributed. And the only food that's being distributed is corn, beans, and oil. That's it. That's all that they get. And in some of the camps, you're given money or a card to be able to purchase your food. And in other camps, they just hand you the food, and that's all you're able to do. So you don't really have control over the type of food and the amount that you're getting. And then when you look at the education in these camps, because they are highly pressurized, they only are allowed to go up through senior 3. And in Rwanda, you're allowed to go through senior 6, so 12 years of education. But in the camps, they're only able to afford going through senior 3. And if you want to continue on your education, you have to pay for it on your own. And living off of $9 US a day, nobody's able to do that. And Oscar is one of the few that's been able to do this kind of work, teach through S6, and allow people to learn from him without having to pay. And in one of the camps that's in Gihembe, they have something called the Hope School, where they extend to S6, and Global Youth Connect was able to work with them, donating books, being able to make sure that they have the necessary materials. But the issue is, even if you go through S6, you're not necessarily able to graduate in what the state considers, what Rwanda considers, because you're not allowed to go in for the national exam because the schools aren't accredited and aren't recognized. So right now there's a really big push to get these schools in the camps recognized nationally. And so where this research comes in, we all came in with some basic research that we had all done personally to talk about what the circumstances were in these camps, what the food was like, what education was like, what a lot of health conditions were like. And we were able to meet with UNHCR while we were at Gihembe and be able to talk to them. What are you specifically doing? What is the difference between what people who live in the camp are telling us and what you're telling us? Because there's always that little difference. Some of them are saying that they're getting less food than you're telling us that they're supposed to be getting. And so being able to have that presence, also bringing in youth from these refugee camps to sit and talk with UNHCR directly, it gives them a greater opportunity to have some kind of voice. And so after all of these processes, doing our own independent research and being able to meet with UNHCR, we decided to draft a letter to UNHCR dictating all of the issues that we had been finding, being able to say there are only 3 options for these refugees: repatriation, resettlement, and integration, none of which are available to these refugees right now. There's a very small amount of jobs in Rwanda. They can't find a job once they leave the camp. It's too unsafe to go home. And so what we did was we created this letter. We gave the youth from Kiziba the opportunity to write it with us to make sure that their voices were specifically being heard, and then send it off to UNHCR and do some advocacy to get the education system nationally recognized in these camps. And so the reason that this is so close and dear to my heart is these are some of the people from the Gihembe camp that we had the opportunity to meet with. And you can see Eugenie is the one in the white on the side. Eugenie has a brother that's been sick for 6 years, has been unable to be transported to a hospital, and hasn't been able to be treated because he is in a camp where there's only a doctor 3 days a week, and they're not able to transport to a hospital more than one person every single time that the doctor is there. And with about $15 US, we were able to treat her brother, get him to a doctor. And this is an illness that's been going on for 6 years simply because he cannot be treated. And I think that's one of the most important things is $15 US, that's approximately 2 months worth of the money that Eugenie had. She's taking care of her brother all on her own, and it's literally $15 US. So being able to go there to advocate for her, be able to make an immediate impact in her life, and then talk to the rest of the camp to see what each of their individual stories are, and be able to say this to UNHCR and get it up to the headquarters and really be able to follow up on how they're going to start changing these refugees' lives is extremely important. So thank you for your time, and any questions later I'll be more than welcome to answer.